Hello, my name is Alix Corboy, and I am the chair of the music committee for Friends of Chamber Music. And we're awfully sorry we couldn't present the wonderful Aizuri Quartet in person. They were scheduled to play for us on March 3rd, and we hope to have them back live and in person at some point in the future. In the meantime, we have a virtual offering that will be released on Wednesday evening. And in anticipation of that, we've got half of the quartet here. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, as well as Leanna Kirchoff, who is a member of the composition faculty at the music school at the University of Denver, as well as Metropolitan State University. I'm going to ask the two members of the quartet to introduce themselves, and I want to just start off by saying that the name of the quartet is Aizuri, which refers to a Japanese woodblock and print that is known for its vibrancy and incredible detail. So it's obvious what the musical connection is to that, but I'm wondering how you came to that specific name and how long you've been playing together.
Hi, thank you so much, Alex, for having us today and for having the virtual concert. We're also really sad that we couldn't be in Denver, and we hope that we can come play for everybody live sometime soon. So my name is Miho Sayakusa. I am one of the violinists of the Aizuri Quartet. Emma Frucht is the other violinist. And I am in New York City right now. I was born in Japan and I moved to the States with my family when I was about 4 years old and split my childhood between the two coasts, first in the San Francisco Bay Area and then afterwards in New Jersey. And then I stayed on the East Coast since. And yeah, maybe I'll let Ayane introduce herself and then we can go into the name and how the quartet started.
Hi everyone, my name's Ayane Kozasa. I'm the violist of the quartet. And I was also born in Japan like Miho. And I also came to the States when I was 4 like Miho. But I grew up first in Dallas, Texas, and then moved to Chicago when I was 12. So between Miho and I, we kind of covered the north, south, east, west regions of the United States, which is kind of cool. And yes, I'm also coming from New York City right now, which, yeah, is where the quartet is based.
Yeah, so Alex, you mentioned, the Aizuri, where that name comes from, and it is a type of Japanese woodblock printing that uses various shades of blue ink. And we thought, well, actually, so the funny part of the story is that Karen Uzunian, our cellist, is the one who found, she was looking through some art, some books and things, and she found Aizuri, and she told us about it. And Ayane and I both had never heard of it because it is a very specific category of ukiyo-e. Ukiyo-e is kind of the more broader term for the woodblock prints, and I think many people might be more aware of that word. But Aizuri is the one that is specifically about using those shades of blue and indigo. And we thought that it was, as you noted, Alex, that the kinds of detail that there are in these prints and the vibrancy of the colors. And we also thought it was a really beautiful thing, the materials used, wood, paper, ink, those are all the materials that, musicians are familiar with as well. And also, one other thing that we thought was really interesting was indigo dye originally in Japan was natural from the plants. And around the early 19th century, a different kind of blue, Prussian blue, started becoming imported from Europe. And that kind of led to more creativity and then an expansion of indigo dyeing, both in fabric and in art. And so that kind of merging of cultures, how things mix together and create something more in art, that kind of idea and concept was also really intriguing for us.
That's very interesting. At this point, I'm going to introduce Leanna, who is actually a native of Colorado, eastern rural Colorado, which is kind of an interesting fact. And she is a wonderful composer. and is, as I said, she's on the composition faculty at the University of Denver. She runs the Lamont Composers concert series, which is an opportunity for young composers to hear their music. So, and I thought it would be an interesting conversation that we could have about the program, which is unusual, and composers. And one of the things, I'll let Leanna speak about her experience and what she's thinking.
Oh, well, thank you. It's really wonderful to be with you all today and to get to know the Aizuri Quartet and the program that you're doing. And so thank you for asking me, Alix. So Alix and I know one another from the Friends of Chamber Music, as well as the Playground Ensemble, which is a contemporary music ensemble in the Denver area. So yes, I teach at the Lamont School of Music, which is the main venue. I think that the Friends of Chamber Music hosts concerts. So we're looking forward to the day when you can indeed host them in person. Yes, I am a Colorado native. I was born in eastern Colorado on a farm. That's about an hour and a half to the east of the Denver area. I've lived outside of Colorado in Minneapolis and in the Boston area, but I have since come back to Denver. I have a lot of family in the area. I do a lot of composition of chamber music, but a lot of focus on vocal music, particularly opera in the last several years. And several of my operas have string. They are written for strings. So I have some understanding of string quartet music and writing for that kind of medium. What else can I share about myself? Is that good for the time being?
That's great for the time being. I would like to sort of dig right into the whole issue of programming and in communicating with you, Ayane, and you, Leanna, specifically about the fact that all this music is written by women and that you're all women in the string quartet. And I think it's striking that at my age, for my age audience member, it's unusual to see an entire program of music written by women and a string quartet that is all female. And so one of the things that Friends of Chamber Music is trying to do is to program a broader base so that it's not all Beethoven, Brahms, Ravel, Debussy, etc., but that we are representing different people of color, women, people that are not traditionally represented on the concert stage. But I understand your viewpoint of not wanting to be known as an all-female quartet and boxing yourself in essentially, or only doing music by women. So on the one hand, we have that, and we have the older concert goer, sadly represented by my age group. And then Leanna has spoken about her, as she gets a little bit older, she finds herself focusing on female topics for, and specifically in terms of the subjects of your operas, which I find fascinating. So I wonder if you can all talk about this issue of how do you program, how do you broaden the traditional classical music goers' awareness of different music, and how do you bring a female perspective, Leanna, to your compositions? In 10 minutes or less, let's try and tackle this.
Well, one of the things that I think has really our quartet, the Aizuri Quartet, has identified with is programming, like you said, and that's something that we've always loved to do. We've always loved to spend time on it. Infamously, one of the competitions that we won a few years ago, the M Prize Chamber Arts competition, where you get to curate your own program as you go. And a lot of the groups are like not just string quartets, but saxophone quartets or percussion ensembles. it was a kind of a free-for-all where you got to imagine what is the program that best represents you. And we infamously, because famous because we had to talk about it in an interview in the final round about how we came up with the final program. We had actually, it was about a 20 to 25-minute program that we needed to come up with, but we spent about 6 hours trying to piece together the perfect combination of pieces, because we wanted each piece to not only stand by itself in this really strong and impactful way, but we also wanted to curate an experience for the audience. And so we were thinking about, anything from how does this piece sonically move to this piece, to also just like the logistics of it, because in our quartet, the violins switch. So we were thinking about how can we switch between pieces, the violin spots, but still make it like kind of fold it into the program so it feels seamless. So we were like, okay, while you guys are switching, somebody else will be talking while you guys are doing the logistical stuff. And just like planning out all these meticulous things about the concert experience is something we really love to do. It was about, I don't know, I think like 11 p.m. before the night before the final round that we finally came up with the program after 6 hours of talking. It was rather intense, but that's I think it was really worth it in the end for us, because we really got to showcase who we are. And that's the kind of passion that we put into programming in general. And so I think from where we come from, we love to do a lot of research when it comes to programming and choosing the pieces that we think fit well together. And we love the fact that this program that we're sharing with the Denver audience, is a program of all women composers, because we did the research beforehand of listening to all these other different composers, and we can say with confidence that these are the composers and the pieces that fit really well together. And I think also it kind of is reflected in the way that we had a member change about a year and a half ago within the quartet. And so 2 years ago, when we were searching for a new violinist, we thought about, should we only look at female violinists, or should we open it up to anyone? And in the end, we decided that we would consider everyone, because it was important to think about the musical identity of the group and the musical personality, and who would best fit into the fold of the musical personality of the Aizuri Quartet. And after working with a few people, we realized that it became Emma, and Emma was the person that was the perfect fit, and Emma happens to be a woman. So it was one of those things where, like, we open up all the possibilities, and then once we chose Emma, and Emma also chose us, because it is a two-way street, we were still an all-female quartet, and we can stand by it with confidence, saying that we feel really great about the personalities and the personnel in the group. And so I think it's more of like, whenever it is a time for or when it's appropriate for us to talk about an all-female group and support female composers, we're totally for it, and we support it and we advocate for it. It's also, I think, indicative of the way that we program, that there's a lot of research and a lot of thought put into in the behind the scenes of the programming process. And we know that we've considered everything, all these other composers that we think might fit the criteria of that specific program. And these are the composers that are the best, that we feel are the best for this program. And they happen to be all women.
Leanna, that's very interesting. So it's not just a question of sitting down saying, we're going to pick all women. And I suspect, Leanna, it's the same for you, where you don't necessarily say, I'm going to write about women, but what's the process like for you in identifying how you choose subjects?
Yeah, right. Like, it seems like so often you're invited to do a project, and so it's more of a, in retrospect, I look back on the last decade or so and realize that, oh, this is a thread in my compositional output, is that I'm writing a lot about female topics, and I'm writing a lot for singers, female singers. So the it was technically the second opera I wrote as a part of my DMA program was a chamber opera for four women. There are two characters and their inner selves that are on stage. And it was actually based on a play written in 1913. So it's not like it was a, a modern subject, contemporary subject, but it was basically the protagonist is really reflecting upon her marriage and um, trying to decide if she's married the right person or not. And I think the things that come into play are the whole idea of agency. Are women free to choose? In 1913, probably, you'd probably want to marry a wealthy man if that opportunity came your way, because there would be security in that, because you wouldn't necessarily have been able to, make your own living. So even though 100 years later, when I'm writing about that topic, I still think there is resonance in women as we consider what our options are. What are we going to do with our our lives? Are we going to do we want to be mothers? Do we want to be working women? Can we do both? Just I think a complexity of questions that women still have. The other two operas that I've written that have female topics, one is about sisterhood, which someone pointed out to me just very recently, that there aren't very many operas that feature that relationship, that there are a lot more operas about, romance, for instance, than there are about sisterhood. And so I was glad someone mentioned that to me, and examining the importance of that relationship. And then the latest opera is about female experiences in the Syrian war crisis, which became, as I read more about that, became important to me, that we sort of amplify what it is that women in other parts of the world experience, and think about how that relates to our own experience. This opera is for 9 women. So talking about that sisterhood thread again, you really, when you see the 9 of them together, all female voices singing, you really get that sense of solidarity among them. So I sort of anticipate continuing, actually, to investigate, to examine the ways women relate to themselves, to one another, and to the greater culture. I think those topics are really, really interesting. So that feels like the kind of mindset I'm in right now.
I think what's interesting is that if you look at the music that you all have programmed, that the two earliest composers were really rebellious women, that Hildegard von Bingen was quite extraordinary. And Barbara Strozzi published 8 books of her own works. She had no sponsorship. She was completely on her own. And then if you look at the contemporary pieces, those women have all had extraordinary lives and are, I'm thinking of Rhiannon Giddens and that piece that you guys are performing called at the purchaser's option, which is sort of, when I first read that, I was just flabbergasted. It was really so stunning. Um, so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the programming of these pieces, and actually backtrack a little bit. And I find it interesting that the title of the concert is from prologue, from past pro. Wait, what's past is prologue. Thank you. And I'm wondering, why did you go all the way back to Hildegard von Bingen and Barbara Strozzi, as opposed to um, Clara Schumann or Robert Schumann, or, you know, I muted myself too soon. I wonder if you could comment on that.
Yeah, I think it's I love Leanna's talking about opera, because I think vocal music and that aspect of music making is something that the quartet really loves, and vocal music resonates with us a lot. So that actually was part of the reason why we chose a chant by Hildegard von Bingen, and also madrigals by Barbara Strozzi, that we thought, how would they be if a string quartet were to play them? Like the challenges of playing vocal music with string instruments, but also the beauty of that. Um, and with all the composers, especially the newer composers, we felt that they were inspired by and would reference older forms of music, and that's where that title, "What's Past is Prologue," comes from. And especially with the newer pieces, all of the composers are really thinking about how to advance the string quartet form. What new things can string quartets explore? What kinds of new sounds, and um, it's been great to work with we work with the composers to discover, and because they often do have very um, vivid and specific ideas about the sound that they're after, or the effects that they're after. Um, and so it's been a really great exploration, this whole program, for us.
I think also one of the earlier pieces that we wanted to include in the program was Nina Young's piece, Memento Mori, because that was a piece we had actually been introduced to and that we performed a few years back. So this is kind of for us, a relearning of that piece. And back when we first learned it, we really fell in love with the piece. It was just like a one-time thing that we got to play it at, or I think we got to play it maybe like twice or something, 2 or 3 times. And we just really we wanted a chance to learn it again. We wanted a chance for it to grow more, to be able to share it with a wider audience again. And that's kind of so we had that piece that we were really excited about and excited to share. And then it becomes, on the programming end for the audience, what are the sonorities that would best complement that piece? Because it's such a particular sound world. It would be good to either have something that's complementary and also very contrasting at different points in the program, to make sure that the audience doesn't feel like it's an overload of information, or that it feels fresh for them. So I think that was another reason why we decided to put some of the more like really, really early music pairing with Nina's piece too, because it's so contrasting. And yet, if one so chooses, they can probably find some kind of connection within the sound palette of these composers as well. So I think I think it really gives kind of a choose your own adventure for the listener. Um, and so that kind of came into play too, with bringing in the really old and then like really, really new music.
Yeah, and I think, when Leanna was talking about, the subject matters of our operas too, I was thinking about, yes, it's how we can relate to, the subject, or to how, especially, I was thinking about how women relate to each other, like just the relationships, and thinking about that. And I think that's something that within the quartet we think about, because how we hear a piece is totally different depending on what other pieces are grouped together with it. And that is, I think, a central part. We keep saying it, but about how we program. And I think, for example, if we found, say, a Beethoven quartet that we thought would be, we could, like, maybe in the future create another version of this What's Past is Prologue program, and we found a Beethoven quartet that we felt would be great in it. I'm sure that, when we hear the Beethoven, it's through the lens of the other pieces on it, and then we hear the new, for example, perhaps the newer pieces differently because we've heard the Beethoven and we know that the theme and there's a through thread. And yeah, so
That's interesting. That makes me wonder, Leanna, when you compose, do you go through a process of what has preceded you in terms of your own compositions, or what you have been listening to or hearing at the current time?
Well, before I answer that question, I just wanted to say I loved your programming and the way that the historical pieces sort of show that women have been composers and performers as long as there's been music. I like that maybe puts us towards that idea. So I just wanted to say that while we're on topic. But absolutely, with every new project, I absolutely look at what has been done for that genre or for that instrument, whatever the project is. I loved one of you said you do a lot of research in your programming. The same would be true of me. I do a lot of research. If it's an opera, I'm likely going to be doing research on different types of music because I'm going to want to figure out the language of a particular character, and I'm going to might need to somehow marry my own music with music of a different genre in order to capture a particular character's music. But if it's an instrumental only piece, I definitely would do a lot of work in terms of listening to what's been done for that instrument before. I'm working on a piece for oboe, clarinet, and piano, and oboe is the one I know the least about. So I've been doing a lot of listening to oboe repertoire. I, in particular, don't tend to quote from earlier pieces. At least I haven't yet. So I know other composers, that's really important part of their aesthetic. It hasn't been so much for me, but definitely what's been done in the past definitely informs what I need to do for the future in my music.
In relationship to the program, which I found just fascinating, I was particularly struck by the Carrot Revolution, and I remember before I read about it thinking, how did she come up with that title? And so to read about how she came up with that title was really significant, because what it led me to was to do a little bit of research about Dr. Albert Barnes, who is responsible for the Barnes Foundation, which for our Friends of Chamber Music audience, if you have a chance to visit this place in Philadelphia, it is remarkable. And he was a physician who made a fortune because he co-discovered an antiseptic. And he spent about 30 years collecting art from mostly Impressionist, Post-Impressionist, and modern art from all around the world. And in addition, he felt that art should be displayed with artifacts. So he also collected African masks and Indian jewelry and metalworks. And he had a home in the suburbs of Philadelphia where he had all of these articles arranged. And there were such troubles with traffic, et cetera, and crowds that the city of Philadelphia moved it to downtown. where it's easily accessible. And so the composer felt that just looking at all those things in contrast with each other, and you could see a piece of Indian jewelry next to a Cezanne, that she felt that this piece would reflect all of the numerous musical styles that affected her compositions. And the carrot piece of it is that originally this quote was attributed to Cezanne, who said that the day will come when a single freshly observed carrot will start a revolution. And so she was sort of struck. It turns out he actually didn't say it, but I wonder if you could talk about that piece in particular, and because it seems to me to sort of represent bringing a piece by Hildegard von Bingen, that sensibility to a Memento Mori, that there's this whole universe of different sounds and aesthetics. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that particular piece.
Sure, yeah. We love Carrot. It was a piece that came into existence while we were in school at Curtis, and Gabriella was in school there as well. So we actually got to, because of that, we got to tour it all over the place. And we got to tour it in South America, which was such a joy. It was kind of amazing how no matter where we would play it, for especially like for students and stuff, it would always bring this sense of just like joy. And you know though we couldn't communicate, we didn't speak the same language, somehow this piece would just light up everyone's spirit, and everyone would smile. And that was something that was really, we always talk about the power of music, but that was something that was extra special to us, that like, wow, this piece that, essentially at that point, Gabriella was still a student. This piece that was made by a student composer, this young up and coming composer, is like, just, it strikes so many people in like in a common and similar way. And that was like really powerful to see. And we're so happy also that I think now Gabriella is such a successful composer as well in her own right. And she's gotten so many amazing commissions, both chamber and orchestral. And we're so happy to see her because her launch her career, because she's so talented. And the piece for us, I think, as we've seen it also, and this is a new part of a piece's growth, but we've seen it also being played by other string quartets. And that's something that we haven't seen yet. We've seen it for some pieces, but it's a little bit rare because there is a lot of music being written, which is really great. But to see the continuity of a piece that has come into existence while we are in existence as a quartet, that's something that's really exciting. And each performance by different groups has been unique and different, and that's also really cool to see. So that has just been a really amazing experience to be a part of that journey of Carrot Revolution. We really think it's gonna be a part of string quartet standard rep. Maybe that's too forward in thinking, but I think that it will stand against the history of time, and it's gonna last. I think it's such a great piece.
Yeah, I think one of the things that makes that piece so great and so and very unique and special is that connection to the Barnes Foundation. And with all of the art on the walls there, the art wasn't arranged by time period or by country or by, it was really what Dr. Barnes saw as connected. He drew all these associations and connections. This part of this painting flowed into this arch of this painting, and then into this piece of metalwork, and into this front piece of furniture, and so it just kind of created this ensemble. He called them ensembles on the wall. And so I think with the music, Gabriella really takes the musical influence that were important to her and that she loves. So you hear, folk folk singing, also older music like Perotan, and kind of rock and roll and fiddling, and all of those things are for her combined in this piece as an ensemble, and she draws kind of the connections between them, and also has the quartet. This is definitely a piece that for us, we were like, wow, we have never played sounds like this ever. And it's another fun thing is if we play it for students, they always want to ask, how is that written? Like, how would you write something like that in the music? And or like, how did you work with the composer on making those sounds? And even if they're not musicians, like if the students aren't musicians, they're just really curious. And it's really great that a piece of music can just spark so much curiosity.
Yes, yes. Well, as we are closing, I'm getting to closing time. I have a question for all of you, and that is, of course, it's been a heck of a year, and it was over a year ago that you all were supposed to come. Well, you were supposed to come anyway. How do you see the end of the pandemic changing what you do and how you function in the world as composers and as musicians?
I think, this is a specific change that happened during the pandemic for the quartet that has been really great is the fact that um, we've actually done a lot of student composer workshops.
Mm.
And it's something that we realized is actually very possible and in some ways even better virtually, because we get to connect with departments from all across the country, and if we want, like around the globe, if it's possible. And we've been able to, most recently we did one virtually at the University of Southern California, and we got to workshop a bunch of student composer works by recording their drafts and then sending it back, then having a Zoom talk to talk about stuff. And then during the actual final recording process, they were virtually patched into the session so they could listen in. And then at the end, we'll have a listening party where we get to watch all of these video recordings we did. And then the composers will have these portfolios of their pieces too, which is really great. And that has been a really special process for us. We love being a part of the creative process for a new piece that's being written. And so it's been a joy, and we're really grateful we've been able to do multiple ones of those. And we hope that, hopefully this pandemic will be over soon. We hope that we can continue to do that kind of work with composers and provide them with these video recordings of their works so that they have things that they can use. And yeah, it's like a new virtual connection that I never expected would feel so meaningful. So that's been a really positive experience.
That's wonderful.
Just piggybacking off of that, yes, absolutely. The connection that we've been able to make. Lamont Composers Department or Composition Department also did a residency very much like you're talking about, but with the Now Ensemble. Maybe you know them. So yes, there's been that. We've had guest composers all over the country, and one even in the Netherlands. It's just opened up that world now where I think going forward, in my composition seminar class, I think it will be totally possible. Any composer that we would like to invite, I think it's, now having a virtual time with them is totally acceptable way of interacting. So yes, there's been just many things over the past year I've been involved with, similar to this, that have, in fact, widened my network of people I know. So even though I may have been home more, I still have felt like it's been a very productive year. Um, in terms of opera production, opera has really suffered under this, obviously, because if you're doing large productions, it's just the logistics are just really hard to overcome. But I have seen opera try to do smaller things, very small casts wearing masks. Um, I had a performance of one of my pieces, and they had these huge masks, like, a couple feet. And that was part of the overall concept, is like masquerade. So these masks were at the same time, creating safety among the singers, but they were also, part of the staging. So anyway, I think there's been a lot of creativity in the opera world anyway. But I do, for the sake of live performance and larger productions, I'm really looking forward to being able to do that again.
I'll just add a little something. I think, Ayane and Leanna just said so beautifully. In terms of connection, like when as performers, people often say, um, you never know who's going to come to a performance, and you never know who might be out there who's listening. And I think it's really neat that right now, and this goes both ways, we as performers, but also we as consumers, or as audience members of music too, that we can listen to and get to know so many different groups, so many different kinds of repertoire that maybe wasn't quite as it was possible, but through the virtual platforms and mediums, it's become more accessible. So maybe the research that we do, or if we're curious about something, we want to discover new things, I think that's become much more possible compared to before, which is really neat. Yeah, and then we can also think about different. I love different ways to combine what makes us safe with art, like Leanna just talked about, or we can think about how differently can we serve our audiences, or serve people through what we do, through the art that we create. And that's something that the quartet has definitely thought a lot about. And we've last summer started a new video series for younger audiences, and that was inspired because we do love our school visits when we're on the road, but we couldn't do that, and we still wanted to connect with students in younger ears. So we figured out, how can we do that? And I think it is a time when we can just really think in different ways.
Think outside this box that we are stuck in. And I would like to propose that when you do come and play in person, maybe we can coordinate and collaborate with Leanna and the students, the composition students at Lamont. And furthermore, take the quartet out on the road, because Friends of Chamber Music does a lot of educational outreach, and we would love to present you to the kids, the children of Denver. So the concert we're going to have it up on Wednesday night at 7 o'clock. If you don't have tickets, you can still buy tickets, and on friendsofchambermusic.com. And I would like to thank everybody for participating, and hopefully we'll get to see each other in person sometime over the next several months. Fingers crossed. Anyway, thank you very much, and please take care and be safe.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.